This is a sun and moon emblem. You probably cannot see it very clearly. Inside this emblem are the sun and the moon. This will be our sun and moon emblem going forward. It can be used regularly in our activities. Wherever the sunlight and moonlight exist, the sound of our Dharma teachings on compassion and wisdom will be heard. This signifies an auspicious connection. Therefore, in the future, this sun and moon will remain subtle. The sun and moon are not meant to be something conspicuous, because as for the sun and the moon, everyone in the world has no choice but to acknowledge their presence. Thus, in any place you go, there should be no one who refuses to acknowledge the sun or the moon. The sun and moon represent wisdom and compassion. We have no particular personal agenda of our own. We only wish to share the light of the sun and the light of the moon. Those who value these two lights should also have faith, should they not, no matter which corner of the world it may be. The radiance of the sun and moon illuminates this world. Do you understand the meaning of this? Do you understand? Do you understand the symbolic meaning of the sun and the moon? If not, you should go home and contemplate it further. What is the sun? What is the moon? The light of the sun is golden. The light of the moon is white. What is the significance of the sunlight and moonlight? You should think about it in this way, right? We should value the sunlight and moonlight. What does that imply? The radiance of the sun and moon can dispel darkness. What is the meaning behind this? By relying on the radiance of the sun and moon, countless things in the world are able to ripen and flourish. What does that mean? Think about it in this way. There are so many whys, like 100,000 whys. There are 100,000. What does it mean? Some time ago, I also received some different treasure vessels on which images of the sun and moon were clearly visible. What does that signify? Well, in the future, the sun and moon will not easily fall from the sky. The light of the sun and moon will always exist in this world. What does that mean for us? What should be done for places where the light of the sun and moon has not yet reached? What is the implication? Just contemplate these questions deeply, all right? Furthermore, the radiance of the sun and moon holds no bias. As long as all living things on the earth have their own aspiration, the sun and moon would never say, I will shine on this but not on that. It would never say such a thing, and the radiance of the sun and moon could never be claimed by anyone. Westerners cannot say, this is our sun and moon radiance, nor can Easterners say, this is our sun and moon radiance. For every person, as long as they can see the sunlight during the day and the moonlight during the night. All right, I will stop speaking in riddles now. That is roughly as much as I can say for now. There is still a great deal more to consider. In the future, one could specifically write an entire treatise on the radiance of the sun and moon. Many questions could be addressed therein. And if a blind person cannot see the radiance of the sun and moon, what then? What would that signify? Yeah. Some people might not understand and wonder, what is this person saying? That is also a valid observation. When I speak about the radiance of the sun and moon, why is it that some people cannot understand it? Is it because of them or because of me? One should think about that as well. And for those who have already understood it clearly, why is that? Thakba Mambala Muba Lok Jiang. Thakba Mambala Muba Lok Jiang, Thakba Chimbu Semchen Namla Yang Topper, Uzipishir, the Chunyamba, Yonder Jopa Tamchid Na, Yang Nawa, Shibar Nam Yongsur Member Shavi Shir, Yike Takan Tamchid Tagan, Jovan, Dopini Bayan Topper Tambishir, Matsunga Kim Gundogan Jigba. Jamba yang da bra jibi shirde chang chong kim tamchit da gang jigba chu jim chok dan bi shirde chonghon ji nang da yang chonghon de gen ji gerwa zamba gen ji lemba yong sir che bi shirde kim da ge nang da kim da da gen da gerwa zoba dang diba dang stop dang rap da go bi shirde yarik ji nang da yang
Jarik Kunjib Kurwa, Narjerdang, Jagbadang, Chakba, Shundog Zombie Shird, Tramze Nanda Yang, Tramze Kunjib Kurwa, Jarbu Shava Tamchada, Chudam Tumberin Jigbi, Tumberin Govi Shir, Lombo Nanda Yang, Lombo Kunjib Kurwa, Jarbu Longshotan, Wangshik Chakba, Lobi Shird, Jonni Nanda, Jon Kunjib Kurwa. Wilmer John Yonsur member of Shavi Shird, Zumun Kurti Nanda Yang, Nigrum the Kunjib Kurwa, Tamarjib, Sonum Cabrajan, Sonum Cabrajan the Yang, Pabram Bishir, the Steo Parado. Steo Paradam, Tumber, Jigba, Wangshik Chamber of Tambishir, the Jashin Nanda Yang. Jashin Kunjib Kurwa, Yishi Chabrajan Tambi Shir, Sambi Nanda, Samba Kunjib Kurwa, Semjin Tamchi Yonsur Membi Shirdan, Jiktin, Chungwa Nanda, Jiktin Chungwa Kunjib Kurwa, Tela Lutzamba, Jima Meper, Chakba Tsab Mepi, Taulam Kibe, Yishi Dan Dande, Yangbi Chongchir Chimbo, Na, Ne Shang De Go.
A portion of the text was recited some time ago. On that day, the transmission I recited was not completed. Today, let us continue. Please, everyone, generate bodhicitta for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, let us proceed with the Vimalakirti Sutra. In regard to the Vimalakirti Sutra, as for the audience gathered here with me today, those near me are primarily monastics. But for the online audience, lay practitioners are the majority. No matter what the setting may be, whether lay practitioners or monastics are the majority, once we study the Vimalakirti Sutra, we should all, on one hand, learn from Vimalakirti, the layman, and his conduct of guiding beings through skillful means. But on the other hand, we cannot imitate him to an excessive degree. Otherwise, before our own realization has reached his level, there are some areas where we should be careful and attentive. What are the benefits of studying the Vimalakirti Sutra? What are the benefits? Primarily, on one hand, the Buddhism we may have understood before, which many people think requires abandoning all worldly dharma and seeking a dharma of liberation apart from worldly affairs. This includes the common belief that the so-called monastic life requires one to see through all worldly affairs and go to a secluded place where no one can find them. They think one must wear tattered clothing and live a life of extreme hardship and simplicity. That is seen as the only proper conduct of a monastic. Most people think in this way. When interpreted from the perspective of the Pratimoksa precepts, that view is indeed correct. However, we cannot generalize all situations in the same way, for monastics can at times exhibit behavior that differs from the conduct of ordinary people. This includes a point I cited some time ago. In the Vinaya, even if a monastic wears particularly fine or expensive clothing, such an exception is permitted within the Sarvastivada Vinaya. Furthermore, regarding the food they enjoy and the dwellings they live in, if these standards are exceptionally high, it is also permissible. But there is a specific condition for this. One must maintain pure precepts while possessing a mind-seeking liberation and so forth. In such cases, we might not be able to judge by outer appearances alone. Certain conducts of Buddhist practitioners are truly difficult for worldly people to fathom or surmise. Under these circumstances, it is vital that we cultivate a view of purity within ourselves. You should be clearly aware of your own mind stream. Do not allow yourself to be bound by afflictions. If your own mind stream truly possesses the character of afflictions, you should follow the conduct of the Shravakayana as much as possible. That approach is very safe. There is no danger of falling whatsoever. Otherwise, if our inner realization is at a very low level, while our outer behavior appears quite advanced, our conduct and our views may become completely contradictory. This could ultimately lead to falling into the lower realms and experiencing all manner of suffering. This is a very real possibility. So when we discuss the inconceivable conduct of Mahayana bodhisattvas, when observing such inconceivable actions, we must reflect from two perspectives. On one hand, even if we cannot personally accept it, we should not assume it is unlawful. To immediately slander, reject, or abandon it, or to proclaim that such conduct is illegitimate, is actually quite unreasonable. This applies to some Buddhists nowadays, sometimes in the articles they write or in their criticisms of others. It is possible that while they are criticizing, they are committing a grievous spiritual offense. This is a real possibility. As we continue, we will see that Vimalakirti the layman possesses diverse qualities. As Buddhists, we should seek to understand his noble qualities with some depth. This is very necessary. Last year, while preparing to teach the Vimalakirti Sutra, I cross-referenced the Tibetan and Chinese texts once more. In the process of doing so, I was deeply moved and filled with inspiration. I wondered when I would ever have the chance to teach this sutra. I thought about how wonderful that would be. In truth, many of the wrong views held by Buddhists today can be resolved by relying on this sacred scripture. Many problems Buddhists face can be easily solved. Furthermore, many misunderstandings that non-Buddhists have about Buddhism can also be completely dispelled. At that time, I felt, especially when I read the chapter on skillful means and those following it, I felt a profound sense of longing. I truly wished that as soon as possible, if I could teach this even once in my lifetime, it would be marvelous. But now that I'm actually teaching it, perhaps some of that initial sense of freshness has faded. However, I observe that for many of you, perhaps the first time you encounter these words, you have many questions and profound feelings. Some of the problems we encounter in daily life, including those that some Buddhists frequently raise in various settings regarding the questions they bring up, the answers provided here are very clear and definite. Therefore, whether you are a Buddhist or not, whether you are from the East or from the West, when it comes to studying such a famous and valuable scripture, one that has been held in high regard for thousands of years, when you have the opportunity to study it, each of us should naturally be willing to sacrifice our time and set aside other personal matters. We must cherish it greatly and receive it with a joyful heart. This should be our attitude toward learning. If we approach it with a joyful mind and a genuine yearning, then with this state of mind, we will face no difficulty in handling other matters in life. There will be no difficulty at all. Even if you feel tired or find it challenging while listening, you will experience no difficulty. This includes some Dharma friends in the research class here, whose residences are quite far away. I am aware that among those gathered here, some live on the East Mountain and some on the West Mountain, while others live on the South or North Mountain. These are the various locations within our own Mount Wutai. As for those who have traveled here, not everyone in our group drives a car. That is not the case. Each person relies on their own spiritual powers to arrive. Some may not even possess the power of swift feet. Some walk very slowly. I can see that coming here is not easy, but I observe many people, including those in our research class, and basically every day there are almost no empty seats. Now all the seats have been officially assigned. Once they are assigned, I can see at a glance if someone is absent today. Yet I see that everyone remains very interested in hearing the Dharma. In reality, a person's interest is very important. Once there is interest, no matter how much time you spend or how much effort you put in, you are willing to do so. For you, it is also a very joyful endeavor. If you lack interest and your faith is insufficient, then even something very simple may be very difficult for you to accept. All right, I will not say too much, otherwise we may not finish today's extensive content. Perhaps we will not be able to finish it all. Today we begin by explaining that Vimalakirti, the layman himself, abides in the 6 Paramitas of the Mahayana, and he uses these 6 Paramitas to gather and guide sentient beings. What is meant here by gathering and guiding is that it seems the English equivalent is attract. From our perspective, this involves taking him as a model for learning or relying on this approach to educate and transform others. It means using this approach to enable others to continue learning. For instance, the text states that his wealth and resources are immeasurable and boundless. Vimalakirti, the layman, possessed great merit and fortune. Among us, some have wisdom but lack wealth, while others have wealth but lack wisdom. Those who are complete in every respect are very rare. In contrast, Vimalakirti, the layman, possessed immense wealth and a vast abundance of resources. The moment money is mentioned, it seems everyone's interest is immediately piqued. We were discussing the renminbi the other day, asking what its true nature really is. He himself possessed perfect and complete wealth. Moreover, he did not simply enjoy this wealth for himself. He also used this wealth to gather and guide others. He would draw near and guide the many who were poor or lacked merit, helping these beings through his generosity. He did this primarily through the generosity of material giving. Furthermore, he himself upheld pure precepts. Regarding all prescribed transgressions and natural moral transgressions, he was without the slightest stain and exceptionally pure. Through this pure conduct, he would guide those in the world who had broken their precepts or whose conduct had degraded. He would approach and gather such people as well. He would never look down upon or abandon those who had broken their precepts. They are also very much to be pitied. Then he used patience to tame and subdue the conduct of his own three gates. He would guide others who were jealous or had harmful intentions, as well as those beings filled with anger and resentment. A bodhisattva does not stop at practicing patience for himself. He also looks after those whose anger is quite severe, those whose minds are consistently very narrow, and those who fall into anger at any moment. He would gather and guide people such as these. Furthermore, he himself possessed great diligence, especially in the effort to benefit sentient beings. He was courageous, steadfast, and full of diligence. Through this power of diligence, he guided those in the world who were especially lazy or indolent, those unwilling to practice or to benefit others, and those who spent their days drifting in dullness and ignorance. He relied on his own diligence to urge and guide them. Then, regarding the paramita of samadhi, he himself was single-mindedly focused in meditative concentration. He never departed from the shamatha and meditative absorption of samadhi. While never departing from this correct knowledge and mindfulness, he also gathered and guided many whose minds were scattered, those who could never remain settled, and those prone to agitation or drowsiness. This is the paramita of meditative concentration. Furthermore, through the wisdom that discerns and ascertains emptiness, and the wisdom of the selflessness of persons and phenomena, he was able to draw near and guide many beings whose mind streams were filled with ignorance and delusion. Concerning these 6 paramitas, we should follow the example of Vimalakirti the layman. We should try our best, even if we cannot fully perfect all 6 paramitas. When we possess wealth, we should strive to benefit sentient beings. When we ourselves maintain some measure of pure precepts, we should also dedicate the merit of upholding those precepts. Upon seeing beings who are suffering, we should guide them toward the right path. For each paramita of patience, diligence, samadhi, and wisdom, as we attain some level of realization within our own mind stream, we should use this to guide other sentient beings. We should establish them as well in the paramitas of patience, diligence, samadhi, and wisdom. This is indispensable for us as Mahayana practitioners. It is truly indispensable. In the days ahead and throughout our practice, we must never abandon the spirit of benefiting others. At the same time, one also needs to practice for oneself. The most fundamental thing for us now is twofold. One is to practice for oneself as diligently as possible, and the other is to benefit beings to the greatest extent possible. This is our life's aspiration and the greater goal of our existence. After all, we are Mahayana Buddhists. For a Mahayana Buddhist, having such aspirations and goals is very important. The text then continues. Although Vimalakirti the layman held the status of a white-robed one, in ancient India, lay people in general were called white-robed ones, a term still used even today. Actually, there was a specific saying in the past. In India, people primarily wore white garments. We call this gyagar in Tibetan. In the Tibetan language, gyagar refers to a nation or people who wear white clothing. This way of speaking was fairly common. While that might not be entirely the case nowadays compared to other ethnic groups, lay practitioners there may wear white garments somewhat more often. Now, regarding a lay practitioner, although his social status was that of a layperson, what did he constantly uphold? He upheld the pure conduct and discipline of a shramana, a monastic. On the surface, it appeared as though he were a layperson, but in reality he was perhaps even purer than a monastic. Sometimes we can observe this in our everyday lives as well. Some people have already entered the monastic life, yet in their conduct they are no match for a pure layperson, whether in their speech, in their actions, or in their daily practice. Indeed, there are times when monastics themselves feel quite ashamed. I see that some lay practitioners today are exceptionally diligent. Even though they are busy with their lives and work and occupied with all kinds of worldly affairs at the same time, they still strive with great effort to uphold their precepts. This includes keeping the 8-day retreat precepts, the 5 lay precepts, and the refuge precepts. While they also regularly engage in virtuous practices, I sometimes feel that in our Tibetan region there are many, especially devout lay practitioners. When I speak with them, I often feel a sense of humility, although I have been a monastic for many years. It seems their level of diligence makes one feel somewhat ashamed by comparison. In this regard, this layman is truly quite remarkable. Outwardly, he appeared as a white-robed layperson, but in reality, he still upheld the pure discipline of a shramana. Although he lived within the community of householders, he was fundamentally different from other lay people. Others might be entirely absorbed every day in clinging to family, work, and all the various pleasures of the world. However, he never clung to the desire realm, the form realm, or the formless realm. This means he was detached from everything in the 3 realms. Even regarding samadhi and the subtle pleasures of the higher heavenly realms, he would not develop any attachment toward them. As for the things of the desire realm, such as fame, status, and wealth, he remained exceptionally pure and free from clinging. Such a lay practitioner is truly extraordinary. As everyone knows, some of us, whether lay practitioners or monastics, tend to be attached to almost everything. Some people often say, I am especially attached to my feelings. Others say, I am deeply attached to the children at home. Some say, I am extremely attached to my career. Others say, I am particularly attached to my appearance. They are especially afraid of growing old. They worry, what will I do if I really get old? What will happen? Some people feel this way. Others may be especially attached to their own social standing. Everything else seems fine to them. Getting old is fine, and things at home are stable. But once they lose their position, once they no longer have their job, they feel lost. They are very attached to it. We can see that for most people, while they might be attached to everything else, the only thing they are not attached to is their practice. They cling to every other aspect of life, but regarding their spiritual practice, they handle it very casually, treating it as something simple and unimportant. When it comes to practice, they are suddenly content with little and few desires. Some people are very attached to drinking tea, but currently I basically do not drink tea. When I have a cold, I cannot drink it. In the future, please do not send me any tea leaves. Otherwise, once they arrive, I will just give them to others. In any case, if you do send something to me, consider it as belonging to someone else, not to me. That way, it is much better. Otherwise, dealing with all these items becomes a burden, and I have no attachment to them anyway. Today, I am also just drinking water, you see. You see, it is quite simple. I am not attached to tea, nor am I attached to water. Furthermore, regarding Vimalakirti the layman, he manifested as having a wife and children. The Tibetan text confirms this. Zhi Qian's version seems to align with this as well. It is possible that he also had concubines following the ancient customs. The Tang Dynasty translation omits this, yet it appears in other versions. Outwardly, it seemed as though he had a typical worldly family. He did indeed have a family, but in reality, he constantly practiced Brahmacharya. Brahmacharya generally means that if one fully observes all 5 root precepts, there is basically no difference between them and a monastic. Such a person is known as a Brahmacharya lay person. 3 types of vows also teaches this point. However, to the casual observer, he appeared to be like worldly people. In our Tibetan region today, there are individuals who live very much like that. Such people have also existed throughout ancient history. Consider certain mantra practitioners who observe the precepts with exceptional strictness. From a surface perspective, due to certain auspicious necessities of interdependent origination, they might have maintained a household. But in truth, they were never stained by any mental afflictions. just like Saraha, the teacher of Arya Nagarjuna, and also Padmasambhava. In more recent times, this includes the first and second Dujom Rinpoches, as well as Khyentse Rinpoche. Indeed, they appeared to be lay people, but in reality, including their descendants who are known as spiritual heirs of their own lineage, their activities of propagating the Dharma and benefiting beings were immensely vast. They possessed a very high level of realization. Therefore, we cannot evaluate such masters entirely based on appearances. This also holds true for certain figures in the history of Han Buddhism. When looking at the biographies of Kumarajava, as we have discussed before, in his later years, he displayed certain conduct that many found very difficult to accept. Yet, his level of realization was completely beyond the reach of others. Such cases do exist. So, in terms of outer appearances, Vimalakirti, the layman, was indeed a householder. He led that kind of life, but in reality his practice consisted of the long-term observance of pure precepts. Furthermore, he had his retinue, including his attendants and disciples. He was likely surrounded by all kinds of relatives and friends as his retinue. However, regarding these retinue members, normally a large group of people would be quite scattered. Yet what did they consistently take joy in? They enjoyed staying away from the noisy distractions of the world. The Tibetan word for staying away is wonpa. Wonpa implies a state of relative peace and quiet. It also means solitude. I see that in Jiqian's translation it is also called leisurely dwelling. Regarding this leisurely dwelling, although he had many in his retinue, these members were not creating a commotion all day long. They were not caught up in constant bustle, nor were they spending every day watching movies or television. Including the disciples around certain teachers today, some seem to spend every day in pursuit of food, drink, and entertainment, without a single one actually practicing. But Vimalakirti's circle was not like this. His retinue members all enjoyed being free from attachment, aversion, and delusion, and staying away from all distraction. They loved a state of quiet spiritual practice. On the surface, these great accomplished ones and practitioners share common traits with others. Yet there are also aspects that set them apart. So whether we are observing a spiritual teacher or engaging in our own process of practice, we Buddhists have things in common with the rest of the world. In these shared aspects, we need to accord with the ways of sentient beings. But differences must also exist. Therefore, finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind says the following about a teacher. A truly remarkable Mahayana teacher, on one hand, is very much like everyone else. But on the other hand, they are unlike anyone else, because if we were exactly the same as worldly people, we would merely be following the flow of defilement. But if we were completely different, there would likely be no way to guide sentient beings. So, as a practitioner, one should embody this quality. Then here, although he adorned himself with various gold, silver, and precious jewels, Vimalakirti certainly had these as a layman, but he was not primarily defined by these outer adornments. Rather, he was adorned by his own excellent signs and qualities. He was adorned by the level of his inner spiritual realization. Regarding the traditional depictions of Vimalakirti, I notice that in many paintings he appears quite elderly, often with a particularly tall and imposing stature. This was likely the interpretation of the artists. Yesterday I received a Han Buddhist scroll, several tens of meters long. What was it called? The pictorial genealogy of the Dharma realm, or the painting of the origins of the Dharmadhatu. It is said to have been painted by a very famous artist of the past. The Vimalakirti depicted in that painting is also shown this way. This is also true in various other paintings. In the image displayed on the board before our class, whenever he is portrayed, his figure appears especially tall and imposing. Perhaps this is considered a form of majestic adornment. I'm not sure whether Westerners would also perceive this as majestic. This is because Western aesthetic sensibilities differ somewhat from ours. In any case, although his body was also adorned with certain items, he used various precious gems and ornaments as a means of adornment, but most importantly, he possessed inner adornment as well as the adornment of his excellent physical signs. Now for us as Buddhists, sometimes this kind of physical, majestic adornment is also very important. As for monastics, they indeed have their own standards. Their robes and other items are all strictly regulated within the Vinaya. If a monastic wishes to appear very majestic and feels they must dress up, that might be quite difficult. Many monastics may wish to dress up, but there is little they can actually do. At most, they can only wash their robes. I have noticed that before attending a grand Dharma assembly, some people really want to look their best. There was a Lama who lived behind my house. He has already passed away. He was a rather traditional Lama. On the day of a Ganachakra feast, he would wear a brand new yellow robe with inner garments made of lamb skin. On ordinary days, he would not dress this way, but when a Dharma assembly occurred, he insisted on dressing up. He would rise early in the morning to prepare himself. So for us monastics, if we wish to dress up and appear majestic, we may not know how to proceed. However, regarding lay practitioners, some say that after studying Buddhism, you cannot do anything and should wear no ornaments at all. I feel this view is not quite right, as I have mentioned before. While one should not go to the extreme of spending all day on such things, as that would certainly be a waste of time, but a basic level of grooming that is acceptable in public is still a necessary form of adornment. Sometimes such adornment is not entirely at odds with the Buddhist perspective. In the images and paintings of Shakyamuni Buddha, there are no specific ornaments shown, but for Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva or Manjushra Bodhisattva, as seen in the images of Sambhogakaya Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, there are a great many ornaments. We often refer to these as the 13 adornments of the Sambhogakaya. In reality, most of these are similar to what well-dressed people wear today, such as bracelets, necklaces, and earrings. Many head ornaments are also included. Are Avalokiteshvara and Manjushra simply fond of dressing up? Not necessarily, but they do so to bring joy to sentient beings. Even the hat worn by Padmasambhava is very beautiful. Some scholars believe that because Padmasambhava came from Udayana, which seems to be located in modern-day Afghanistan, in that particular region, even to this day, some of their officials and those of the royal caste still wear this kind of hat. I have noticed that they sometimes look quite similar. Their culture has this tradition as well. So in Buddhism, various forms of attire are presented according to the needs and ways of different beings. If you look at the many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in Han Buddhism and the attire of those in the Indian tradition, you will see that they are quite different. In Han Buddhism, they appear according to local customs and aesthetic sensibilities. Therefore, I believe that as a lay practitioner, it is not the case that because you have studied Buddhism, you must offer all your gold necklaces to your teacher, donate all your bracelets away, and ultimately look like a beggar. In our worldly society, when people see this, they might all think, this person became so poor after studying Buddhism. If your appearance does not even meet the basic aesthetic standards of people today, that may not be necessary at all. You see, Vimalakirti, the layman, still maintained this. Sometimes it is appropriate to have certain ornaments. They are still necessary, are they not? In that case, as a Buddhist, it may still be necessary sometimes. No matter where you are, you should dress in a way that is suitable for the local occasion. According to your own merit and fortune, if you have the necessary conditions, you may dress well in all respects. This includes your dwelling and the car you drive. These things should all be fine. However, do not become overly attached to them. The more one clings, the more one realizes that in this worldly realm there is truly nothing worth clinging to. Everything you are intensely attached to is ultimately not as solid as you imagine. These things are no different from water bubbles or a mirage. On the one hand, to accord with the ways of sentient beings, you may enjoy conditioned wealth and resources. But on the other hand, you must deeply understand their essential nature. All conditioned phenomena are ultimately either empty or characterized by impermanence and the production of suffering. This is an inevitable law of reality. This point must be understood clearly. Furthermore, although Vimalakirti partook in all kinds of food, including rare delicacies and all manner of fine dishes. As a great layman of his stature, he certainly had access to the finest cuisine. He had every variety of delicious food imaginable, but he was not attached to any of it. Primarily, the joy of samadhi was his true taste. In other words, he took the joy of samadhi as his nourishment. He used the sublime taste of meditative concentration as his fundamental food. He did not spend every day merely thinking about eating or obsessing over food all day, even in his dreams. Look at some people's WeChat feeds nowadays. While monastics and practitioners might be slightly better, many ordinary people spend their time scrolling every day, wondering what to eat today or tomorrow. They seem to have no other concerns besides this. They scroll through these posts on WeChat every single day. Every time they have a meal, they sterilize it first by snapping a photo, and then they post it to their WeChat moments. They eat 3 meals a day, and every single one must be posted online. By doing this, they don't even know if anyone is actually looking, but a true practitioner like him would never be attached in that way. So this point is also very important. In Han Buddhism, many mealtime verses and liturgies emphasize taking the joy of samadhi as our nourishment. Maintaining this kind of diligence remains very important. He also frequently visited gambling halls and gaming parlors, as well as theaters and entertainment venues, but he did so always to guide and deliver people. He was there regularly, not because of any attachment to gambling or chess. It was not that he enjoyed various entertainments, programs, and theatrical shows. That was not the case at all. His main purpose in going to those places was to guide the many sentient beings there who needed to be delivered. He aimed to deliver such people. This includes many eminent monastics in the world today. Some eminent monastics in this world personally have no attachments. Regardless of what others may say about them, they engage with people through these unconventional means. Through such engagement, they are able to deliver many beings. They also visit such places frequently. But for people like us, truly, we should not even think about going inside to gamble. When I used to visit Malaysia, Macau, and Singapore, we often went to schools to give teachings. Sometimes our hotel was booked right next to a casino. As we went up and down, those gamblers would often watch us. I was very worried at the time. Would they think that I intended to enter those places? Sometimes I would even cover my head with my shawl while passing through. It is not just about going inside to gamble. Even just passing by caused me great concern. However, a true bodhisattva has no grasping of subject and object and no sense of self. They have completely let go of all such concepts. Thus, they can enter such settings without issue. The Collection of All Good Returns also states that in the conduct of a bodhisattva's adaptability, they may frequently accompany thieves, butchers, and prostitutes. By being alongside them and adopting conduct similar to theirs, they can guide and deliver them as well. The forms and methods for delivering beings are diverse. Therefore, we might sometimes see someone entering one of these impure settings and think that is certainly improper behavior. Nagarjuna Bodhisattva spoke of 6 places one should not frequent. He went there today. This must be wrong. Such thoughts will inevitably arise, but in reality, truly genuine bodhisattvas have completely severed their attachment to self. Purely for the benefit of beings, they regularly engage in such acts. Throughout history, many great masters have guided many sentient beings through this approach. Vimalakirti, the layman, was no exception. Furthermore, he engaged with all kinds of different paths, meaning the various non-Buddhist traditions. Yet he would never compromise his own right faith. He might study worldly schools of thought and non-Buddhist teachings, but during the course of his studies, he would not allow himself to be absorbed by them. Some Buddhists nowadays intentionally go to study other traditions first, and eventually they think, this is wonderful. This happens because they lack a firm and solid view. In the end, they end up following those other paths. Such situations do occur. This occurs perhaps because their own foundation in the Dharma is weak. When one's foundation is weak, they ultimately lose their sense of direction and become unable to distinguish between different teachings. It is just like what I mentioned before. When we were teaching the standards for being a good student and child, there was a monastic who said, "This is exceptionally good." From now on, I will stop studying Buddhism and only study this instead. Imagine that, a monastic saying such a thing. This even included a monk who was working in our Dharma propagation department at the time. Setting aside the good points, if I mention the shortcomings of your department, please do not be upset with me. Of course, studying Confucianism is quite beneficial in its own right, but he gave up his primary path. If one studies it as a supplement, that is fine. We are also studying it and we are also teaching it. In this context, the key for a bodhisattva is to remain open to all kinds of different teachings. This quality is very important. Look at the Venerable Purna at that time. As it was also mentioned in our study materials, when Venerable Purna tried to guide non-Buddhists, he was truly at a loss. Later, Manjushra Bodhisattva completely integrated with them. Ultimately, Manjushra Bodhisattva was able to deliver them. Bodhisattvas possess this kind of skillful means. As we focus on teaching the Vimalakirti Sutra these days, one must understand the necessity of skillful means. With such skillful means, actions that worldly people might perceive as improper are in reality not only proper, but from the perspective of a bodhisattva, they are precisely what should be done. Thus the text states that he does not damage his own right faith, and although he is well versed in worldly scriptures and classical texts, he always takes delight in the Buddha Dharma. Regarding his attitude toward worldly phenomena, as we were just discussing some time ago, the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras explains the 5 sciences. Similarly, although he thoroughly understands all kinds of worldly knowledge and information, just because he understands this worldly knowledge will his Buddhist view ultimately vanish and disappear completely. That will absolutely not happen. So on the one hand, to deliver beings, one truly needs to understand this world, especially in today's era of highly developed technology. If we, whether as Buddhists or practitioners, know nothing at all about worldly matters, it truly poses significant difficulties at times. This is especially true for certain monastics, such as those who entered a monastery at a very young age. Their entire world is defined by the study of the Tripitaka from childhood. However, once they step away from the Tripitaka, they may either develop doubts about Buddhism, or because worldly knowledge possesses a certain attractive power, they may find themselves unable to pull away when faced with such alluring distractions. Ultimately, they lose their spiritual realization and simply follow the worldly stream. Such things do happen. So, for someone of my current age, having seen and understood quite a lot already, when we encounter various attractive things in the world and all kinds of alluring phenomena, we might feel, well, it is only this much. On the surface, it may appear significant, but in reality, behind the facade, that is all there is to it. However, for some of our fellow Buddhists, and particularly in the context of Tibetan Buddhism today, where access to information has been relatively restricted and the outside world was largely out of view once they finally see it, they might exclaim, wow, this is so beautiful. In the beginning, when we were in a school in the mountains and eventually moved to a town, well, it was not exactly a large city. We went to Garze to study. When I saw a television for the first time, I thought, wow, this looks especially wonderful. As for what was actually inside it, previously we had only seen films projected on a screen, but had never seen an actual television set. After arriving there, many of our classmates could only watch TV on Sunday nights once a week, and they loved it dearly. When I first arrived, I felt the same, but after a while I did not find it very interesting and preferred to read books on my own. Some of my teachers now recall, you were quite a solitary person back then. In their eyes, I was indeed a solitary and lonely person. Regarding our current situation, we often speak of worldly treatises, for example, the 4 Vedas of India. These are often categorized as non-Buddhist teachings. However, this Indian knowledge, when viewed through the lens of many people's values today, is very attractive. Within these teachings, there are techniques like cupping, as well as medicine, astrology, and many aspects of wellness and health cultivation. These include mantras and a vast amount of knowledge that resonates very deeply with people's physical well-being. Therefore, at times, understanding worldly knowledge can be quite important. Otherwise, some Buddhist masters may feel that these matters are problematic. They might say, these all generate discriminating thoughts. These are all obstacles to your liberation. Do not look at them. Keep your eyes closed. Do not listen. Cover your ears. if you live your entire life in this way, it can sometimes be quite difficult. I previously read about a certain master in the biographies of eminent monks. In his early years, Master Huiyuan had a fairly thorough command of the 9 schools of Chinese traditional culture. He studied them deeply and was very interested in their contents. He was particularly interested in certain Confucian ideas. Later it is said that he met a Dharma master named Dawan. At Master Dawan's place, he heard the Paramita Sutra. After listening to the Paramita Sutra, perhaps due to some virtuous connection from the past, at that moment he experienced a profound realization. Regarding the 9 schools, including Confucianism and Taoism, he said they were like chaff, lacking any real substance. Of course, such a statement might not be something everyone today would want to hear, but regardless at that time, whether it was Confucianism or Taoism, Mohism, legalism, or the school of yin-yang, there were many different schools of thought. Initially, he found all these schools of thought to be very good, but later on, he felt that the prajna of emptiness was exceptionally supreme. The 400 verses also teaches us that if we have doubts about the profound principles of the Dharma, it is best to first approach it through the Dharma of emptiness. By relying on the Dharma of emptiness, what can one discover? One can understand the Buddha's profound and hidden teachings. What was Master Huiyuan's perspective at that time? While relying on the prajna of emptiness, he felt that all other worldly knowledge was of no use. You can look this up in the biographies of eminent monks when you have time. In his case, on one hand, he had already mastered all worldly knowledge, yet in the end he was no longer interested in anything besides Buddhism. He felt it was all like chaff. However, perhaps we cannot be so absolute in our judgment, because for different sentient beings, other forms of knowledge are not entirely like worthless chaff. Such knowledge still provides nourishment. It still contains essence and significant value. All who see him show reverence, which is the highest form of offering. Regarding the meaning of the text here, it seems to imply that everyone who met him showed him great respect. They would also regularly make offerings to him. The text carries this specific layer of meaning. This is quite similar to Jichen's translation from the Wu Kingdom. Then the translation from the Tang Dynasty states that all who saw him did so mainly because of his teaching of the Dharma. Through this teaching, he was respected and received offerings. This may be the intended meaning. In the Tibetan version, it says that although he often appeared in crowds looking as though he were among distracted people, in reality he was respected and received offerings from everyone. Thus, for this single phrase, different translators had their own unique approaches to the translation. However, I believe the most essential point is that when Vimalakirti the layman was among different groups of people, everyone felt immense delight. As we see below, whether they were human beings or celestial beings, everyone was exceptionally happy. On one hand, his internal level of spiritual practice was likely a contributing factor. On the other hand, it was because he could get along harmoniously with everyone. This is a point that we as practitioners should carefully consider. The reason I wanted to teach these lessons on Vimalakirti the layman, why did I choose to teach this? I have noticed that we Buddhists sometimes find it difficult to connect with others. Except for 1 or 2 people they are closest to, they seem unable to get along with anyone else at all. They do not even want to look at others. This is a very significant mistake. It does not reflect the character of a Mahayana Buddhist at all. For a Mahayana Buddhist, you must be able to harmonize even with a hated enemy. You must even be able to get along with a hateful demon. Only then can you be considered a genuine Mahayana practitioner. Otherwise, we will simply be unable to accord with sentient beings. This is a very alarming situation. I recall Nan Huaijin once saying that some people are covered in the scent of Buddha. They speak only in Buddhist jargon and cannot say anything else. This type of Buddhist is quite a particular case. His meaning was likely not a favorable one. He also mentioned followers of other religions, such as Christianity. Once there was a vehicle for Christian outreach that drove to his door and kept preaching to him for 2 full hours. The people inside would not leave. Later, he wrote them a note that said, "God says do not disturb the peace of others." The people read the note and then they left. He He felt that perhaps as Buddhists, being too heavily attached to our own outward forms is not a very good thing. That point is indeed very true. If we are within a Buddhist community, or if we are attending a Buddhist occasion, being full of the scent of Buddha is wonderful and poses no problem. If a person speaks entirely in Dharma language, discussing specialized subjects like Madhyamaka or logic, it does not matter even if others cannot understand it. However, when we are in different social settings, some people truly need to employ skillful means. Otherwise, we might find ourselves in a situation where everyone is particularly dismissive of Buddhism. In such a setting, if I were holding a prayer wheel like this, people here would think it is perfectly fine. Everyone in this community accepts it. But if I were to hold a prayer wheel inside a university, others might slander us because of it. Therefore, as Buddhists, we sometimes truly cannot be purely formalistic in our approach. Some people refer to this as being a materialist of appearances, clinging only to a certain image. For instance, followers of certain religions nowadays wear their symbols and go everywhere with them, regardless of whether others are willing to see it or not. It eventually causes everyone to grow weary. When walking, they speak to those standing, they speak to those sitting, and they even speak to those who are lying down. In that case, although some people might feel, and some Buddhists also argue, look at how well other religions promote themselves. Should we not also do the same? Actually, it is not necessarily the best way. We still need to appear as normal people to others. This is extremely important. We need to live a normal life within their world. Regardless of your clothing as monastics, in order to live as normal people, going to the city does not mean wearing a suit. That is simply not possible. Among certain groups of lay people, our monastic robes will look a bit unusual, but there is nothing that can be done about this. If we are in the majority, however, such as here at Larungar, where most are monastics, those wearing lay clothing might feel a certain way. They might wish to join this sea of red. Some of them do think in this manner. But when some of our monastics arrive in the city, they might wish to wear their clothes instead. Some monastics might have such thoughts, but regardless of the circumstances, try to keep the major principles unchanged. If it is truly impossible, as long as your precepts remain intact, you may adapt. There are differences between Han and Tibetan monastics. When monastics visit their parents at home, they certainly face certain difficulties. But we must decide based on the specific situation. We have no authority to allow what is forbidden. However, skillfully employing means is very important. As the text says, whoever sees him gives rise to joy. Upholding the right Dharma. The right Dharma mentioned here refers to worldly norms. It is primarily from that perspective. I see several commentaries explain it in this way. He uses worldly truths and education to guide the elderly, the middle-aged, and the young. The Tibetan text mentions three distinct levels. The very old, the very young, and the youths. The WHO defines those under 65 as youths. Yesterday, I saw some elderly people comforting each other in their WeChat groups. They said, under 65, you are still a youth. But regardless, at a certain point, a person must possess some self-awareness. Vimalakirti the layman relied on this right Dharma. It was not necessarily Buddhist Dharma. He used truth. He used truth to guide people of different ages. This point is also extremely important. By studying the Dharma, we also hope to reach people across all levels of society, including both monastics and the lay community. Within the lay community, there are the elderly and the young. For the elderly, we establish lay Buddhist centers for them using this approach to transmit the right Dharma. And for the young, this includes teaching standards for being a good student and child. This kind of approach remains very important. Therefore, I hope both our monastics and lay practitioners will develop vast faith and confidence. You must believe I should be able to do this. Do not think that studying for yourself is enough. As long as I have no afflictions, Lama Kayan, that is enough for my life. If we gradually shrink away in this manner, our very presence will become smaller and smaller. It would then be too easy to attain the rainbow body. I am not speaking of true realization, but of becoming so insignificant that one vanishes. We should follow Vimalakirti, the layman's example. He had a very broad and vast mind. He was able to benefit so many people. This is what we should aspire to. This completes this section of the teaching. Then their state of mind also gradually shrinks. Truly, some people become especially restrictive. It seems whenever something is proposed, they say, this won't do, that won't do. Instead of that, it is better to expand your state of mind. Sometimes a greater aspiration leads to greater strength. This principle is truly inconceivable. The sun and moon emblem I just showed everyone is a perfect example. The radiance of the sun and moon touches upon all things. Within this very lifetime, if I cannot complete the guidance of beings in this life, I will continue in my next life and the life after that. Life after life, I will remain committed to this path. Even if it is for the sake of guiding just one single being, I will do everything in my power to help them. I will dedicate all the strength I possess. If you maintain this kind of state of mind, then there will certainly be no problem at all. I once saw a short story that claimed one's physical appearance is not a problem. This has been proven by the success of Jack Ma. It also said academic credentials are not a problem, which was proven by Bill Gates. Many people offer many excuses, feeling I am unattractive and I have no qualifications. They claim they have no knowledge. By using many such reasons to shrink back in the end, they are doing something that is quite unnecessary. Everyone should use various means to encourage themselves. If we can generate this kind of confidence, we can guide people of different ages and different levels. Like Vimalakirti, the layman, we will be able to guide all. All his worldly occupations were successful. Although he obtained worldly profit, he did not rejoice in it. Regarding all his worldly occupations, in modern terms, he was engaged in commerce and business. In his business dealings, everything went very smoothly. There were no difficulties because he was very wise. His business acumen was excellent. It might appear that Vimalakirti, the layman, was just resting on a large bed, but in reality, he was very capable in business and making money. The profit he obtained was higher than anyone else's. On the surface, it might seem he was very fortunate. One might think he had so much money, but in reality he did not take joy in these things. Perhaps it was merely a method for him to benefit beings. It was simply a method for his noble endeavor. He also fully understood the danger of greed. As the way of the Bodhisattva says, those who crave gold scatter their minds. Liberation is far away. When there is too much money, the human mind becomes scattered. As a result, liberation becomes very far away. The teachings of Layman Pang from earlier times state that when there is too much money, it disturbs the mind, so sometimes worldly wealth is not something worth clinging to. Do not deliberately cling to worldly wealth. It should not be treated as a source of joy. However, it is not that he was incapable of doing these things. Therefore, from the Buddhist perspective on doing business, some Buddhists might worry about their choices. They might say, I want to do a little business now. But they are afraid that Buddhists are not allowed to do so. In reality, we Buddhists still need to find ways to sustain ourselves. We must do things to maintain our own livelihood. Yesterday, we also discussed this at great length. Regarding some of us Buddhists now, including us monastics, I am still very concerned. I care about the future old age care for many people here. This includes health insurance and old age insurance. I am not entirely clear whether many things found online are reliable. However, we do have certain departments here that are taking a pilot type approach. We are running some pilot programs to see how they work. Some people among us are also involved, whether within our study association or elsewhere. Those who have some capability should try to help as much as possible. Our money is something we cannot take with us when we die. In that case, you should voluntarily share it with many people. By sharing in this way, you can help those who lack merit. It might benefit those facing difficulties in this lifetime. Doing things for their old age and health is truly necessary. Doing work in these areas is very beneficial. So in these situations, sometimes, although a monastic is not attached to anything, needing neither family nor money, one can still show concern for them in this way. For you, as lay practitioners, our Buddhists now have our own communities in various places. We have some of our own organizations. When you have your own organization, within that organization, on the one hand, talented people can stay stay and will not drift away. This is also a skillful means for propagating the Dharma. On the other hand, if this becomes a long-term commitment, people today also need to rely on commerce. They rely on various means for survival. Otherwise, some Buddhists might think that others must always support them after they study Buddhism. It is not good if we do nothing for ourselves. This perspective is very important for our growth. Even for us monastics, there is nothing wrong with doing certain things ourselves to sustain our lives. Some Han Buddhist monastics have expressed this before. As a monastic, one should generate the aspiration to provide for one's own sustenance. With this kind of noble aspiration, enjoying the possessions of the triple gem in the future will not be a fault. Therefore, it is entirely reasonable for Buddhists to engage in commerce for their livelihood. These actions are completely justified, but within these activities, deliberately deceiving others is unacceptable. That would be improper and wrong. What follows next is this. It seems I may not be able to finish today's teaching, right? For this section, I originally intended to cover more. Let me just teach a little more of the text. Then the scripture says, in wandering the crossroads, he dispensed benefit to sentient beings. He would travel to various places. The wandering the crossroads mentioned here, some commentaries say 4 refers to the bustling marketplaces of a city. In Master Xuanzang's version, it refers to the city markets. In our Tibetan text, it says he would often visit various crossroads and intersections. This means he was active within the city. Otherwise, what would such a great layman be doing at a crossroads? Would he be waiting for a vehicle or something else? He often visited well-connected hubs and thoroughfares, or we can say he wandered in all directions, entering various cities across the world. Today he might go to Shenzhen, tomorrow to Washington, and the day after to New Delhi, India. He traveled to all kinds of places. What was his purpose for going there? It was certainly not for sightseeing. He did not travel for the purpose of daily consumption. Nowadays, some people with better financial conditions spend every single day just consuming goods. Some people say, I want to visit a certain number of countries, traveling merely to add a number to their tally. Some go in order to show off to others, claiming, I have visited this famous scenic spot or that landmark. But Vimalakirti, the layman, did not travel for pleasure or recreation. His travels were solely for the benefit of all beings. In different cities and in different regions, there are various types of beings. They all require his guidance and wisdom. So it seems to me that he must have been very busy. Recently, he has fallen ill. If he were not ill, he would be traveling to various places. He would be visiting many different locations. Perhaps I should stop here for today. All right, the time is about up. I had originally intended to reach the line, the elder Vimalakirti used immeasurable skillful means such as these to benefit sentient beings. I had planned to finish this part today. I am not sure how the time passed so quickly. All right, let us conclude at the point of his visiting many places. Regarding Vimalakirti, the layman's annual plan of visiting many places, the auspicious connection is quite good. Today I have a special auspicious connection. This connection is indeed very positive. I truly wish to learn from layman Vimalakirti.
Bandara